Happy Wednesday, Holy Family! This week, I would like to talk about something called the Western Schism. It's a little piece of Catholic history that you may have heard reference to throughout studies or conversations with people, conspiracy theories, etc. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about what really happened. Now, there was a time in the 1200s when the papacy moved its seat from Rome to France. There was a lot going on in Rome that wasn't exactly the safest place to be, and the papacy felt they were being pressured in Rome and that it would be more advantageous and easier to rule the church without too much influence from France. So they moved to Avignon. Well, as it would happen, they started being heavily influenced in France as well. So in 1377, Pope Gregory XI decided it was time to move the papacy back to Rome. Now, all of this is completely legitimate. It doesn't have to shake any kind of confidence in the papacy. The papacy is not bound to the geographic confines of the city of Rome, although the Pope is the Bishop of Rome. In moving back to Rome, Gregory XI hoped that it would free the church from a lot of the influence of the French kings and the French bishops and cardinals who were under the authority and the being pulled in strings by the French king. Shortly after arriving back in Rome, Gregory XI died, so it was time to elect a new pope. Well, the cardinals got together and decided that it would be best to elect an Italian pope at this point, fearing both the continued influence of the French and the people of Rome who were clamoring for an Italian pope. After the papacy had been gone for so long from their city, they wanted to secure someone who is loyal to them. Now, the man they elected, Pope Urban VI, was not the nicest guy in the world. He was not what they expected in terms of a leader and someone they could work with. He was known for his fiery temper and just general unpleasantness. So, claiming that they had been unfairly influenced by the people of Rome, the cardinals got back together, this time in France, and decided to elect someone else. Well, the problem with this is that Urban VI was still Pope. He was still there. So when they elected a second man, Clement VII, they now had two men who were claiming to be Pope, who had been elected by cardinals in different cities and with different sets of people who were allied to them. Now, neither man wanted to step down. Both of them felt they had been fairly elected. And as time went on, both of those men died and new popes were elected in their place. However, you can't have two popes, right? We can only have one pope, so which one was the true pope? Well, the disagreement went back and forth. There were actually saints on both sides of this debate. Some saints were sure that it was the one in Avignon. Some saints were sure that it was the one in Rome. It goes on and on and on and on until we get into the 1400s. So we're talking about more than 30 years of intense disagreement within the church and uncertainty of who the chief shepherd of the church is. At the beginning of the 1400s, the 15th century, some of the church hierarchy get together in Pisa and decide, we will solve this. We'll have both of those other men step down and we'll elect a final real pope. Well, the problem is they didn't have the authority to hold that council, and the other two men didn't step down. So now you had three guys who all claimed to be pope. The one elected in Pisa was Alexander V. He was succeeded quickly by John the 23rd in Pisa. So at this point, we have John the 23rd in Pisa, we have Gregory the 12th in Rome, and we have Benedict the 13th in Avignon. Only one of these men is actually Pope, but no one's entirely sure who that is. Thankfully, Gregory the 12th and John the 23rd were both desperately committed to reuniting the church. They agreed to step down simultaneously, and although Benedict the 13th would not agree, they mutually excommunicated him. And so we were left with no popes, which is exactly where we needed to be. The Council of Cardinals then met in Rome and legitimately elected one final pope, Martin V. From there, the church was able to move forward, reunited under one shepherd. Now, many people talk about this time in history about when we had 3 popes or when we had 2 popes, and that's just not true. You can only ever have 1 pope. The pope is elected when the previous pope either dies or resigns, and once he is elected, you can't get rid of him. He is pope until he dies or resigns. So although they might not have liked Urban VI in the beginning, he was the pope. So when they elected Clement, he was not. Therefore, everyone elected in the Avignon line thereafter was not a legitimate pope. The ones in Rome were. Not because they were in Rome, but because they had been legitimately elected at the death or the resignation of the pope prior. Resignation is a very rare thing in our church. Historians disagree about exactly how many popes have resigned throughout history. We know of at least 3 or 4 that were pretty clear cases. As you know, Pope Benedict resigned in 2013, and that was huge. The church was rocked by that, because it had not happened since Gregory the 12th ending the Western Schism. Now, thankfully, for our day and for our church, Pope Benedict didn't resign because of a schism. He didn't resign to dispel any alternate claimants to the papacy. He resigned because he felt that he was called to do so, and has stayed on as a great mentor and intercessor for Pope Francis and our church today. We can be grateful to him for that, and be grateful to God for protecting our church throughout all of our crazy histories, all of the ups and downs, the human frailty, and the saintly victories that we've gotten to experience together.